He was bleeding into the snow when 8-year-old Luke Harper saw him, not moving, not breathing right, just lying there like the storm had already claimed him. Luke froze. His heart hammered so hard it hurt. If he ran back to the cabin, the man might die. If he stayed, the storm might take him too. Inside the cabin, Evelyn Harper felt it before she heard it, that quiet shift in the air. The kind that meant life was about to demand something from her again. When Luke burst through the door, white-faced and shaking, she knew whatever waited outside would change everything. But could she afford to turn away? The wind screamed across the Wyoming plains, slamming snow against the small cabin like fists. Luke's boots sank deep with every step as he led his mother toward the barn. His fingers burned, his face stung, but fear pushed him forward. "There," he said, voice barely louder than the wind. Evelyn saw the man at once, half buried near the back wall. Blood darkened the snow beneath him. A fine wool coat hung open, soaked through. One hand clutched his side. The other held a leather satchel like it was the last thing tying him to the world. "Oh, Lord," she whispered. Behind her, 12-year-old Maggie pulled her younger brother close. "Is he dead?" Evelyn didn't answer. She knelt, pressing 2 fingers to the stranger's neck. A pulse, weak, but there. "We can't leave him," Luke said, already knowing the answer. Strangers brought trouble. Evelyn knew that better than most. Since her husband died 2 winters ago, trouble had circled like wolves. But letting a man freeze to death on her land wasn't something she could live with. "Help me," she said quietly. They dragged him through the snow inch by inch. The man was heavy, dead weight. By the time they reached the cabin, Evelyn's arms shook with exhaustion. Inside, warmth hit them like a wall. The man groaned faintly as they laid him on their only spare bedding. Evelyn cut away the coat. Blood seeped from a shallow gun wound. Not fatal. But the cold had nearly finished him. She cleaned the wound with shaking hands. Used precious water, used their last clean cloth. "Ma," Maggie said softly, "what if he's dangerous?" Evelyn met her daughter's eyes. "Then we'll face that when he wakes." The blizzard didn't ease for 3 days. The man drifted in and out of fever, muttering names that meant nothing to them. Regret soaked every word. Evelyn listened while she worked, night after night, by lantern light. "I should have been there," he whispered once. "I chose wrong." Sometimes he cried out for a woman named Mary, sometimes for children far away. Each word tightened something in Evelyn's chest. She noticed his hands. Soft, not used to labor. His boots were expensive. His coat worth more than everything in her cabin combined. On the second night, she found the pocket watch, engraved inside. To Daniel Blackwood, always come home. The name struck her like a blow. She had heard it before. In town. In whispers. In anger. Her husband's mine. The one that collapsed. Evelyn closed her fingers around the watch until it hurt. On the 4th morning, the storm broke. Sunlight poured through the window, harsh and honest. The man's eyes opened at last. Green. Sharp, even through pain. "Where am I?" he asked. "You're alive," Evelyn said. "That's enough for now." He tried to sit up and failed, winced hard. "How long?" "Longer than you deserved," Luke said before Maggie could stop him. The man looked at the children, then back at Evelyn. Shame crossed his face. "I owe you my life." "You don't owe us anything," Evelyn said. "We did what was right." He reached for his satchel, pulling it close. Relief washed over him. "My name is Daniel Blackwood," he said, "and I can pay." Evelyn stepped back. "Put that away." He studied her then, really looked. "You know who I am." "I know you were dying," she said, "and now you're not." The truth sat between them, unspoken and heavy. Over the next days, Daniel healed slowly. He helped where he could, fixed a broken hinge, taught Luke how to let the hammer's weight do the work, listened when Maggie spoke, really listened. At night, Evelyn watched him from across the fire. This man had lived a life of comfort, power, And yet loneliness clung to him like a second skin. One evening, Maggie asked, "Do you miss your kids?" Quote. Daniel stared into the flames. "Every day." Evelyn's hands stilled in her sewing. When Daniel asked about her husband, she told him the truth. Mining accident. Cave-in. 2 years ago. Daniel went pale. His breath caught. She saw it then. The guilt. The recognition. The past had followed him here. Outside, the wind shifted. Something howled in the distance. Long. Low. Daniel rose slowly, pain flashing across his face. That wasn't the storm. Evelyn reached for the rifle by the door. From the tree line, shadows moved. Too many, too close. She met Daniel's eyes. In that instant, she knew saving his life had only been the beginning. Whatever came next would demand far more than kindness. And none of them were ready. The wolves came out of the trees like living shadows. 6 of them, lean, silent, watching. Evelyn stepped forward, rifle tight against her shoulder. Her heart thudded, steady and loud. Luke and Maggie stood behind her, breath held, fear sharp in their eyes. Daniel moved without asking. He placed himself between the cabin door and the children, his wounded side pulled tight, pain flashing across his face, but he didn't step back. "They're hungry," he said quietly. Winter pushed them close. "They're not taking my sheep," Evelyn said, "or my children." The lead wolf lowered its head, yellow eyes locked on them. A low growl rolled through the air. "Luke," Daniel said without looking back, "when I say run, you grab your sister and go to the cellar." Luke nodded. His hands shook, but his jaw set. The first wolf lunged. The rifle cracked. The sound split the air like lightning. The wolf fell, sliding across the snow. The rest scattered, then regrouped, circling wider now. Smarter. Daniel grabbed an axe handle from the porch. He held it like he'd done it before. Like his body remembered something his mind wished it didn't. Another wolf rushed from the side. Daniel swung hard. Bone met wood. The animal yelped and fell back. Evelyn fired again. Missed. The pack hesitated. Firelight spilled from the open door as Maggie hurled the lantern forward. Flames flared. Heat. Smoke. The wolves retreated, melting into the trees as fast as they'd appeared. Silence followed. Thick. Heavy. Daniel bent forward, breathing hard. Blood darkened his shirt again. "Inside," Evelyn said. No argument. They worked together without words. Maggie cleaned the wound. Luke stood watch, rifle clutched tight, eyes scanning the dark. "You didn't have to do that," Evelyn said softly as she tied the bandage. Daniel met her gaze. "Yes, I did." That night, no one slept much. The next days brought uneasy calm. Daniel insisted on helping, despite the pain. He fixed fence posts, hauled water, worked until his hands blistered. Evelyn watched him closely. Every small kindness made her chest ache. Every laugh with the children tightened the knot she didn't want to name. One afternoon Luke asked, "Mr. Blackwood, were you ever scared before?" Daniel paused, hammer midair. "All the time." "Even when you were rich?" "Especially then." That answer stayed with Evelyn. Trouble arrived on horseback. Caleb Boone rode up just before dusk. Neighbor, former business partner of her husband, a man who smiled too much and helped too little. His eyes went straight to Daniel. "Didn't know you were hosting guests," Boone said. Evelyn stepped forward. "He's recovering from injuries." Boone's gaze sharpened. "Funny, he looks familiar." Daniel met his stare calmly. "Just passing through." Boone smiled thinly. "Strangers bring problems, Evelyn. Especially wealthy ones. We didn't ask for your concern." Boone tipped his hat. "Didn't say you did." As he rode away, Daniel exhaled slowly. "I should leave." "No," Evelyn said. The word surprised them both. Running never solved anything. She knew that too well. That evening the truth finally cracked open. Daniel stood at the mantel, staring at her husband's photograph. His voice broke. The mine. It was mine. The words fell heavy and final. Evelyn's hands clenched. Her vision blurred. I know. He turned, shock written across his face. You knew? I knew your name, she said. I knew what it cost. Silence swallowed the room. I didn't know the men, Daniel said. Just numbers. That's what haunts me most. Quote. Her voice trembled. My husband had a name. I know now, he said, and I can never undo it. Maggie and Luke stood frozen, listening. You saved him anyway? Maggie whispered. Evelyn couldn't answer. Daniel grabbed his satchel. I'll go. Before he reached the door, Boone returned. This time with the territorial marshal. Daniel Blackwood, the marshal said. You're wanted for questioning. Evelyn's heart dropped. Boone's smile widened. Seems you've been harboring trouble, Evelyn. The children clung to her skirts. Fear pulsed through the room. Daniel squared his shoulders. I'll come peacefully. Evelyn stepped forward. Wait. She handed the marshal a bundle of papers, accident reports, her husband's name, dates, proof. Boone scoffed. Too late for sympathy. The marshal read, slow and careful. This changes things. Daniel looked at Evelyn. Gratitude, regret, something deeper. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly. I know, she replied. And that frightened her most. They took Daniel away as dusk fell. The cabin felt hollow afterward. The children barely spoke. Trust lay cracked on the floor between them. Outside, the wind rose again, and somewhere beyond the trees, something waited. The cabin felt wrong without him, too quiet, too empty. Even the fire sounded smaller. Evelyn moved through the morning like a ghost. She cooked. She cleaned. She folded blankets that didn't need folding. Luke and Maggie barely looked at her. When they did, their eyes carried questions she couldn't answer. You lied, Maggie said at last, her voice thin. I didn't lie, Evelyn replied. I chose. Luke stared at the floor. You chose him. The words cut deeper than any knife. Evelyn set the tin cup down slowly. I chose to save a life. And Pa? Luke asked. Who chose him? Silence answered. That afternoon, a rider appeared on the ridge. Caleb Boone, again. He didn't dismount. He didn't smile. Marshal released Blackwood pending investigation, he said. But that doesn't fix your problem. Evelyn felt cold spread through her chest. What problem? Quote. Boone held up a folded document. This land, your deed, harboring a wanted man raises questions. That's not lawful. Law bends, Boone said, especially for widows. He leaned closer. But there's a way out. Evelyn knew what he meant before he said it. Marry me, Boone continued. I protect the land, the children, you! Her stomach turned. Get off my property. Boone's eyes hardened. 3 days, then I file my claim. He rode away, dust rising behind him like a warning. That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She thought of Daniel sitting alone under the stars, of his guilt, of his hands shaking when he spoke her husband's name, of the way he stood between wolves and children without hesitation, and she hated herself for missing him. 2 days passed. Boone's men circled like vultures, whispering in town, watching the cabin, waiting. On the 3rd morning, clouds gathered low and heavy. Evelyn loaded her husband's rifle. Maggie watched, silent. Luke stood straighter than his years allowed. They're coming, Luke said. Horses thundered toward the cabin. Boone rode at the front, papers in hand, men flanking him. Evelyn stepped onto the porch, rifle steady. Last chance, Boone called. Sign or lose everything. A new sound cut through the tension. Hoofbeats, fast, determined. Daniel rode in hard from the west. His posture was different now. No hesitation, no running. Boone sneered. You're supposed to be gone. Changed my mind, Daniel said. You're still under suspicion. And you're still a thief, Daniel replied calmly. He dismounted, pulling documents from his satchel. I cooperated with the marshal. Federal investigators followed my trail. Turns out you've been forging deeds for years. Boone laughed. Too loud. Prove it. Daniel didn't raise his voice. Already did. The marshal appeared from the tree line with deputies. Chains gleamed in the dull light. "Caleb Boone," the marshal said. "You're under arrest." Boone's face drained of color, his men scattered. Evelyn lowered the rifle slowly, her knees nearly gave out. Daniel turned to her. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." She searched his face, found no lies, only resolve. The children stood behind her, watching. "I failed your father," Daniel said quietly, "but I won't fail you." Luke stepped forward. "You didn't run." Daniel nodded. "Not anymore." Spring came gently after that. Snow melted. Grass pushed through. The land breathed again. Daniel stayed. Not as owner, not as savior. As a man willing to work. He planted crops where blood once stained the ground. Fixed the roof. Taught Luke to read contracts and Maggie to count figures. The children laughed again. Slowly. Carefully. One evening Maggie asked, "What are you to us?" Daniel thought before answering. "Someone who stays." That was enough. Months later, the cabin stood stronger, warmer, filled with quiet hope. Evelyn watched Daniel add wood to the fire. Watched Luke and Maggie lean close, listening to his stories. The past hadn't vanished. It never would. But it no longer ruled them. Outside, the land rested under open sky. And for the first time in years, Evelyn believed tomorrow might hold more than survival. Spring settled in slowly, like it didn't quite trust them yet. Evelyn felt the same way. Daniel rose before dawn each morning, quiet as a shadow, careful not to wake the children. He worked the land with a patience that surprised her, not rushing, not proving, just doing what needed doing. Evelyn watched from the doorway more than she meant to. He carried himself differently now. No sharp edges, no hurry, like a man who had finally stopped running from himself. Luke followed him everywhere. "Hold the plow steady," Daniel said one morning. "Don't fight it, guide it." Luke nodded, jaw tight with focus, his hands blistered. He didn't complain. Maggie stayed closer to Evelyn. She helped with accounts, read old ledgers, asked careful questions. "Why does he stay?" Maggie asked one evening while washing dishes. Evelyn didn't answer right away. "Maybe he's learning what matters." "Is that why you let him?" The plate slipped in Evelyn's hands. I didn't let him," she said gently. "He chose." That truth sat between them, fragile but real. News from town came in pieces. Boone's arrest, more charges. Other widows coming forward. Men speaking names that had been buried too long. Daniel never defended himself, not once. When the marshal rode up with final papers, Daniel took responsibility in full view of the neighbors who had gathered. He spoke plainly, owned every decision. "I built wealth," he said, "and I destroyed lives doing it. I'll spend the rest of mine trying to fix what I can." The silence afterward wasn't kind, but it wasn't cruel either. Later that night, Evelyn found him sitting alone by the fence. The sky was clear, stars sharp. "You could have left," she said. "I tried," Daniel replied. "Didn't work." She leaned against the fence beside him, close enough to feel the warmth, far enough to breathe. "I don't forgive you," she said quietly. "I don't expect you to." "But," she continued, voice shaking, "I see who you're becoming." Daniel nodded. "That's all I can offer." Their hands brushed by accident. Neither pulled away, neither reached further. Time passed, slowly, carefully. Daniel moved into the small addition he built himself. No mansion, no servants, just wood, nails, and honesty. The children began calling him Uncle Dan without discussion. It happened one evening by the fire. The words slipped out of Luke's mouth and settled like it had always belonged. Daniel's eyes filled, but he said nothing. Trouble didn't disappear. It never does. One afternoon, a man from town arrived with questions. Sharp ones. About the mine. About Evelyn's land. About Daniel's presence. "You know what folks say," the man muttered. Evelyn stepped forward. "They're welcome to come say it here." Daniel watched her then, really watched. Strength without bitterness, courage without noise. That night, he handed her a folder. Deeds, trust papers, legal protections. "The land stays yours," he said, Always. And you? She asked. I stay if you'll have me, he said. Not as an owner. Not as a savior. Just here. Evelyn's chest tightened. She thought of cold nights, of grief, of the long road she'd walked alone. I can't promise love, she said. Daniel met her gaze. I can wait. Summer arrived, warm and forgiving. The homestead changed. Not richer, stronger. Laughter returned. Not loud. Real. One evening, Maggie sat beside Daniel on the porch. Do you ever miss the old life? Daniel considered the question. I miss who I thought I was. And now? Now I know who I am. Maggie smiled. That's better. Evelyn watched from the doorway, heart full and afraid all at once. Later that night, Daniel knocked softly on her door. I'll be leaving for a while, he said, to finish setting things right. For the other families. Evelyn swallowed. How long? Long enough to matter. She nodded. Come back safe. He hesitated. When I return, if you still don't want me here. I didn't say that, she interrupted. Their eyes met. Hope flickered, careful, earned. As Daniel rode out at dawn, Luke waved. Maggie stood straight. Evelyn held herself steady. The land stretched quiet behind him. And for the first time, separation didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like trust. The days stretched longer after Daniel left. Not emptier, just quieter. Evelyn learned the shape of waiting. She rose with the sun, worked the land, readied meals for 3 instead of 4. At night, she sat by the fire until the embers faded, listening to the soft sounds of a house that knew how to hold its breath. Luke tried to be brave. Too brave. He took on chores without being asked, lifted things too heavy, walked the fence line twice as often. You don't have to replace him, Evelyn told him one morning. Luke shrugged. I'm not. I'm helping. Maggie watched more than she spoke. She wrote letters in careful script, even when there was no one to send them to. Sometimes she folded the paper and tucked it under her pillow like a promise. Word came slowly. Daniel had gone east. Meetings, courts, names spoken out loud at last. Families paid. Land returned. Trusts formed. Nothing flashy. Nothing loud. Justice, done the long way. One evening, a rider delivered a short note. I'm not done yet. But I'm closer. Evelyn held the paper longer than she needed to. Autumn arrived early. Cold crept back into the mornings. The land hardened. Work grew heavier. Then trouble came again. A sickness swept through the valley. Fever, coughs that wouldn't stop. 2 children in town were lost within a week. Evelyn's heart clenched when Luke began to cough. She did everything right. Broths, blankets, cold cloths. Nights without sleep. Maggie sat by the bed, reading aloud in a steady voice. Luke burned and shivered, caught between worlds. On the 3rd night, Evelyn broke. She knelt by the bed, head bowed. Please, she whispered into the dark, not another. Hoofbeats thundered at dawn. Daniel rode in, hard, dust-streaked and exhausted. He dismounted before the horse stopped moving. Where is he? He asked. Evelyn didn't speak. She just led him inside. Daniel took one look at Luke and rolled up his sleeves. He worked quietly, confidently, like someone who had learned how fragile life really was. He sat through the night, changed cloths, spoke softly, refused to leave. By morning, the fever broke. Luke slept deep and easy for the first time in days. Daniel sagged back in his chair, eyes closed. Relief washed through him like rain. You came back, Maggie said from the doorway. Daniel nodded. I said I would. Quote, weeks passed. Luke healed. The valley mourned. Life went on, altered but moving. Daniel stayed. He finished the work he'd started, not just with papers and money, but with hands and time. He helped rebuild a neighbor's barn, sat with grieving parents, listened without excuses. One night after the children slept, Evelyn found him outside staring at the stars. You saved my son, she said. Daniel shook his head. We did. She stepped closer. "I've been afraid." "I know." "If I let myself feel this," she said, voice unsteady, "and lose it again." Daniel didn't reach for her. He didn't rush her. He simply said, "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to choose." Silence stretched, honest, heavy. Evelyn thought of cold nights, of carrying grief like a second skin, of the way Daniel stayed when leaving would have been easier. She placed her hand over his, just rested it there. "I choose today," she said. That was enough. Winter returned with a gentler hand this time. The cabin stood stronger, warmer, full. The children noticed the change first, the way Daniel and Evelyn moved around each other. Careful, natural. "Does this mean he's family?" Luke asked one night. Evelyn smiled. "It means he's here." That spring, Daniel did something unexpected. He stood before the community and stepped away from his empire. Signed control over to boards and oversight councils. Stayed only as an advisor. "I don't need power," he said simply. "I need purpose." The homestead bloomed. Not rich, but alive. Daniel and Evelyn worked side by side, shared meals, shared silence. One evening, Daniel stopped at the fence where they had once stood apart. "I don't know what the future looks like," he said. Evelyn met his eyes. "Neither do I. But I know where I belong." She nodded. "Then stay." As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the land, Evelyn felt something settle deep in her chest. Not forgetting, not erasing, but building. Together. The last winter Daniel Blackwood spent as a drifting man ended quietly. No speeches, no promises carved in stone, just work. And staying. Snow fell light that year, like the land itself had decided to be kinder. Daniel rose each morning beside Evelyn, not ahead of her and never behind. They worked in rhythm now, a shared silence that no longer felt fragile. Luke grew taller, stronger. His laugh came easier. Maggie's eyes held less caution and more curiosity about the world ahead. One evening, as the fire settled low, Maggie spoke what had been living in all of them. "Is he staying forever?" Evelyn didn't rush her answer. She looked at Daniel first. "If he wants," she said. Daniel cleared his throat. "I do." No one said anything else. No one needed to. Spring came early. Grass pushed through the thawing ground. Calves were born. Crops planted. The homestead breathed with new life. Daniel made one final trip to town. Court matters. Final signatures. The past, closed as much as it ever could be. When he returned, he carried no satchel. "I'm done running," he said simply. The land answered that truth in small ways. Fences held. Storms passed wide. The wolves never returned. One afternoon, Luke brought Daniel a folded piece of paper. "I wrote my name," he said proudly. Daniel studied the letters like they were gold. "You'll sign things that matter someday." Luke nodded. "For people, not money." Daniel smiled. "That's the right way." Later that summer, the town gathered at the small chapel, not for celebration, for remembrance. Daniel stood before the families who had lost husbands, sons, fathers. He spoke plainly, took no shortcuts. "I can't return what was taken," he said, "but I will spend what remains of my life honoring it." No one applauded, but some nodded, some cried, some forgave, others never would. Daniel accepted all of it. That night, Evelyn found him sitting alone, shoulders heavy. "You don't owe the world everything," she said. Daniel looked up. "I owe myself the truth." She sat beside him, close, steady. "You've paid enough," she said. "Then I'll start living," he replied. The next change came softly. Daniel moved fully into the cabin, not announced, just happened. His boots by the door, his coat on the hook, his presence woven into daily life. One evening, Luke blurted out, "You're not replacing Pa." Daniel answered without hesitation, "I know." Maggie added, "But you're not leaving either." Daniel met their eyes. Never again. Autumn painted the land gold. The cabin stood warm against the wind. Laughter carried farther than it ever had. On a quiet morning, Daniel and Evelyn stood at the fence line where everything had once felt uncertain. "I didn't plan this life," Evelyn said. "Neither did I," Daniel replied, "but I wouldn't trade it." Evelyn nodded. "Me neither." They married without spectacle, no town gossip, no grand declarations, just a small gathering. Honest vows. A promise built on truth, not need. Daniel didn't take her name. He didn't need to. He took responsibility instead. Luke stood tall beside them. Maggie held Evelyn's hand. Family, chosen and earned. Years later, travelers spoke of a homestead where widows weren't alone, children were taught with patience, and a former cattle baron worked the land like any other man. They spoke of a place where mistakes didn't define the ending. On winter nights when the fire burned low, Daniel would tell the children about a man he used to be. "And what happened to him?" Luke asked once. Daniel added wood to the fire. "He learned how to stay." Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Peace settled around them like a blanket. Outside, snow fell quiet and clean. Inside, 4 hearts beat steady. A life once built on wealth had found something far rarer: a home. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Archives of the Wild West, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.